listening to Let the Bible Speak. Let the Bible Speak is the radio ministry of the Free Presbyterian Church. Stephen Pollock is the pastor of Free Presbyterian Church of Malvern, Pennsylvania. The church is located at the junction of 401 and Malin Road. Thank you for joining us today as Dr. Pollock opens the Word of God and lets the Bible speak.
Let's take our Bibles together and turn to the Psalm 61. The title is here, to the chief musician, upon Negana, a psalm of David. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a shelter for me, and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in thy tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covert of thy wings. Selah. For thou, O God, hast heard my vows, and thou hast given me the heritage of those that fear thy name. And thou wilt prolong the king's life and his years as many generations. He shall abide before God forever. O prepare mercy and truth, which may preserve him. So will I sing praise unto thy name forever, that I may daily perform my vows. Amen. This is the word of the Lord. Spurgeon makes the observation that this psalm is a pearl. It is little, but precious. And he continues to observe that to many a mourner, it has furnished utterance when the mind could not have devised speech for itself. And that's an interesting observation at the outset of tonight's message. It reminds us that God has given us a psalter, a hymn book, a praise book, but also a book of prayers. And when we find it hard to know what to pray, there is invariably a psalm for that occasion. And so the better we know the Psalms, the more readily we can turn to a particular portion that will help us in our various times of need. This psalm, we find David as the king. The recognition is in verse number 6, thou wilt prolong the king's life, and he's referring to himself in that instance. But as the psalm begins, he is away from Jerusalem, and particularly he's away from the tabernacle. He describes himself as being from the ends of the earth, and his burden is to be led to the rock. Now, we will readily spiritualize the rock there, but the actual, the reference itself is to Jerusalem. Again, that city upon a hill. It's a recognition of the high place, and his desire is to get back to Jerusalem, and especially to the tabernacle, referenced in verse number 4. He wants to get to the mercy seat. Not that he himself will approach that. That's the role of the high priest once a year. But he wants to be in the place where worship is wont to be made. He wants to be in that place where God is. He wants to know the presence of God. There's an enemy referred to in the psalm. There's a recognition of an enemy. Most likely the enemy, noted in verse number 3, is Absalom. The psalm more than likely refers to the time of Absalom's rebellion and David as the king and his forced exile from Jerusalem. But the psalm also points towards his return. This is not him in a far-off place without hope of recovery, but rather it is of the returning king. Deletion tells it this way: prayer and thanksgiving of an expelled king on his way back to the throne. And I think that fits the tenses that are used in the verses. It is David on his way back to that rock that is higher than himself. Now, as we've seen in several of David's psalms, we can look at these psalms on different levels. They certainly bear testimony on a very personal way to David's experience of his God. But as they're included in the Psalter, they are for the benefit of God's people, not only in David's own time, but for us several thousand years later. And so there are different levels And I want to do that again tonight. When I was debating this and thinking through the devotional for this evening, I didn't really want to focus on one and miss the other. So there are two levels that I want to consider as you look at this psalm together tonight. First of all, I want to think about David's sorrows and how David's sorrows provide lessons once more to us about the life of faith. And then secondly, I want to think about David's kingdom and how David's kingdom provides pictures of the reign of Christ, David's greater son. So first of all, please note David's sorrows and look at them with a desire to learn for yourself about principles regarding the life of faith. In verse number 2, David is very transparent regarding his troubles. My heart is overwhelmed. That's a pretty recurrent theme throughout the Psalter. Psalm 77, 102, 107, 143 all refer to times when David, the psalmist, feels his spirit being overwhelmed. It's one of those word pictures again in the Hebrew, and it has the sense of someone who's overwhelmed, literally being covered over. And so you may think of it as someone in the sense of deep waters, and the waters are coming over their heads and they are overwhelmed in that sense. It carries the idea of desolation. Again, Psalm 143 says this, therefore is my spirit overwhelmed within me, my heart within me is desolate. And the parallelism there defines the overwhelmed. Desolate is the language the psalmists use. If you turn across also to Psalm 107, just with your own Bibles there, Psalm 107, you'll see the reference word is used, and it's translated differently in Psalm 107, but you'll get the picture. You have the verse number 4 regarding the people of God. They wandered in the wilderness in a solitary way. They found no city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted in them. And the word fainted there is our word overwhelmed. It's that sense of within our souls reaching the point of despair that we feel that we're about to give up. Fainting. We have fought long enough. Now it is time to give up. A sense of despair and desolation. And so for David, he reflects upon this in our verse. He says in verse number 2, when my heart is overwhelmed. Now, as we look at this, you might think, first of all, about the cause of this. Why is David feeling this way? Well, again, you may immediately say, well, of course, it's the sorrow. His son has rebelled against him, and he's been driven away from his kingdom. But that's not, I don't believe, the cause of fainting here. It's part of it. But the fainting of heart that David experiences here is due to a separation from the Lord's city. It's being set apart, taken away from the rock that is higher than himself. Separation from the place of public worship. Separation from the Lord's people. A true Christian will never be content in absence from the house of God. They will lament that absence. Reminded again of our need to keep on praying for our seniors who cannot be in the house of God because they say to me how much they miss being in God's house with God's people. Well, that's David's experience here right now. We see it in our own congregation. There are those and they're overwhelmed because they want to be in the house of God and the place of public worship. At the same time, we're reminded here of the importance of worship and fellowship to maintain the heart of the believer. It's not the issue here, but it does show us once more the danger of a deliberate absence from the Lord's house. We're exhorted, of course, in Hebrews 10 to provoke each other to love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. A deliberate absence from God's house is a step in a very dangerous direction for the people of God. And that step begins with the first step. The first time that somebody chooses to do something of their own pleasure rather than being in the house of God. Something that would cause him to unnecessarily miss the Lord's house. I'm not referring to sickness or other providences, but there are times when people begin a path of backsliding because they say on a Lord's Day, I'm not going to go to church today, I'm going to do, and you fill in the blanks. It's a dangerous thing to get away from God's house. David is showing us that in his own experience. He's overwhelmed because he's not there. And he's showing us through his own experience the danger of that. He's there because of God's providence and God's judgment upon him. But he feels the loss. If that's the cause, the correction there yet again in these Psalms is to resort to prayer. Verse number 1, hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. And what's the prayer? Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. God alone is the hope and the comfort of the overwhelmed heart. Whatever may cause us to feel despair and be at the point of fainting, the answer is always the Lord. He knows what we need, and the psalmist knows that what will correct his sorrow is a restoration of his fellowship with the Lord. In verse number 3, he highlights how that God has helped him in his troubles. He says, thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. He sees that God has helped him, and that's why I say this is David on his way back. He's cried out to God in verses 1 and 2, and then reflects upon this in verse number 3, with then the determination in verse 4, when I get back there, I'm going to abide in thy tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covert of thy wings. He knows that what's going to help him in his troubles is being back in the place of public worship and fellowship with God. You see, the troubled heart, again, whatever your troubles may be caused by, the troubled heart wants to meet the Lord by faith in the atoning work of Christ. The trusting of the covert of the wings here, I think, is not referring in this occasion to the hen gathering the chicks under their wing. It does refer to that sometimes, but the connection with the tabernacle here would indicate the wings of the cherubim. And there's safety for the soul, because this is a soul issue here. It's not a physical issue. The soul is troubled, and the soul finds refuge again under the tabernacle, under the cherubim, the mercy seat, where blood's applied. Atonement has been made. And God says, there I will meet with thee. So many lessons here. Again, you could run lines of thought in different directions here. You know, we may know of unbelievers who want to know something about God. They want to know something of an experience of God. In fact, there are those charlatans who offer an experience of God, but that experience of God is without Christ. It's an experience of God without blood atonement. Again, if you come to know God without Christ, you will come to know God in judgment, in his wrath and not in his mercy. The only way to know God in a fellowship sense for an unbeliever is to come under the cherubim upon the mercy seat where blood has been applied. That's the only way. No fellowship with God any other way. Believers themselves, we may often get downcast for multiple reasons, but God is there for us in Christ. We need to live in the assurance of God's presence. You see, Christ's work guarantees God's presence for all those who take refuge. David's saying, my heart's overwhelmed. I need to get back to the rock. I need to get back to Christ. He's drawing that line for us in a pictorial sense. He wants to physically get to Jerusalem, but his heart is longing to fellowship with God upon the ground of redemption. And it reminds us that for the child of God, in their distress and in their troubles, God is always where Christ is. Christ has secured the presence of God for the people of God, and we do not need to live in the assumption that we've been forsaken. We may feel overwhelmed, but God is there. We may be in the valley of the shadow of death, but there God is with us. His rod and his staff, they're comforting us as his goodness and mercy follow us all the days of our lives. We must never lose sight of the work of Christ. We must never lose sight of the power of the cross and the blood of Christ. We're coming around the table this Lord's Day morning to come. Have you thought about that this week? Have you considered what that may do to help you in your Christian life? Have you given consideration to preparing your heart to make sure you come to receive the elements offered to you in a way that will nourish your soul, that you don't just run into the Lord's house on a Sunday morning and see the table prepared and say, oh, I forgot about this again? No, we've got to continually remind ourselves of the benefits of the cross of Christ and how God himself comes just upon that ground. It's not just forgiveness. We don't just get forgiveness, we get God. We get his tender mercies coming alongside us. And though we may find ourselves in deep valleys of trouble, God is there with us because Christ has secured the presence of the Most High God for us. If that's the correction, and thirdly, in this matter of lessons regarding the life of faith, we see the conclusion. It seems from verse number 5 and following that David has committed to God in prayer. He's been praying, and as he recognizes that God has heard his prayers, so he vows to give his life to God. Verse 8, so will I sing praise unto thy name, that I may daily perform my vows. David's experience after his sin with Bathsheba and all the consequence of that, the death of the child, and then the rebellion of Absalom, all of those things brought David very low. But he returned to Jerusalem with a determination to serve his God, to be present in public praise, that no one would have any doubts that David's faith is in the Most High God. Though he's been brought low due to his own sin, he's going to bear public testimony. I believe in God. I trust in God. I delight in God's presence because blood has been shed on my behalf. That's the public praise here. He's going to teach sinners in the way. It's a sense of restoration. And not only in terms of praise, but his service of God. He's going to say in verse number 5, for thou, O God, hast heard my vows. You're going to preserve my life. What shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits towards me? I will take the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. I will pay my vows unto the Lord now in the presence of all his people. What about us? You've been saved by God's grace. What has that done for your life? Do the people around you recognize that you trust in God and believe in God and know redemption through blood? Are you ashamed to own your Lord? Or are you happy to say to anybody, oh yeah, you may scoff and you may laugh at my convictions, but I believe there's a God in heaven and he sent his Son to die on the cross and that Son rose again that I may have life in him. Public praise unto God. Perhaps you've known some moment of deliverance personally. God has rescued you out of some fearful pit. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. Delight in praising the Lord's name. Be the best David you can be. He was a king. You're not a king. But you can be the best whatever you are. The best husband, the best wife, the best son, the best daughter, whatever your experience may be, the best worker, the best employer, the best church member, the best deacon, the best elder, whatever your responsibilities be, if God has saved you, be the best at what you are. Be the best at what God's called you to be. Don't settle for second best. God's will is your delight. It must be your delight. Be like David here. I'm going to pay my vows unto God. He has heard my prayers. Whatever your experience is, these are things to consider again tonight. The believer's heart, the unbeliever's heart can be overwhelmed, but there's a refuge in the rock that is higher. Christ is that refuge in the place of God's presence. There's so many lessons to learn here from David's sorrows and lessons regarding the life of faith. But secondly, and just briefly, there are so many lessons here, pictures from David's kingdom regarding the reign of Christ. David's restoration to Jerusalem following Absalom's rebellion sets the scene for David's reign that would serve as a type of Christ's reign. There are 6 things that we see in this kingdom. Each of these could be preached a sermon in their own right, and I'm not going to do that tonight. I just want to highlight them and bullet point them for you. You see the vows of the king here. This king, verse number 5, has made vows, for thou, O God, hast heard my vows. Or Jesus, He came into this world having made a vow. Lo, I come, I delight to do thy will, O my God, yea, thy law is within my heart. Christ determined as he comes in incarnate humanity, he comes as the God-man to fulfill the vows. He will indeed save. No one distracts or Christ from his determined purpose, and he obeys even to death and the death of the cross. See, the stability of our kingdom is grounded here upon the vows of the King. Secondly, there's the foundation of that reign. It's founded upon mercy and truth. Verse number 7, oh, prepare mercy and truth, which may preserve him. And of course, David's referring to the fact that he needs God's mercy and God's faithfulness to enable him to serve. God has made promises to him, but so it is for Christ. Christ's reign is based upon the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God's promises. Again, the word truth here refers to God's keeping his promises. Not that his words are true, though they are, but rather his promises are true. Christ's kingdom is grounded upon the foundation of the character of God. And nothing can destroy the character of God, and therefore nothing can destroy Christ's kingdom. Founded upon mercy and truth. Aren't you thankful it's founded upon those things? That Christ's reign is a reign marked by the goodness of God. The goodness of God that doesn't do injustice to the justice of God, but the goodness of God that in perfect harmony to God's justice enables you to be part of this kingdom because Christ has died for such. Thirdly, you see the security of the kingdom. Verse number 6. Thou wilt prolong the king's life and his years as many generations. Ultimately, this speaks of Christ. It's true to the degree of David's lengthy reign, but ultimately only Christ fulfills this in its fullest sense. You see, he's the one who reigns as one who is risen never to die. His resurrection is distinct. Oh, Lazarus, he's brought from the grave, but he dies again. Christ lives in the power of an endless life. His life is prolonged. Oh, it pleased the Lord to bruise him, but he shall prolong his days. Christ, what sort of priest is he? He's a kingly priest. What sort of king is he? He's a priestly king. He's a priest after the order of Melchizedek, according to Hebrews chapter 7. And it says there, who is made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life. As long as Christ lives, so shall his kingdom be. And because his life will never end, his kingdom will never end. That's the security of this kingdom. Fourthly, there is the blessing of God upon this kingdom. Verse number 7. He shall abide before God forever. Psalm 16 speaks of Christ. Speaks of him having God always before him. Acts 2 uses that reference, but in Psalm 16 it says this, Thou wilt show me the path of life, in thy presence is fullness of joy, at thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. That's the picture of Christ in the presence of the Most High God. The blessing of God, accepting the conquering King back into his presence. And God is pleased to be with his sinless Son, who's achieved everything set out for him in the gospel. Christ achieves those things, and he's with the Lord, the Trinity. But now the second person of the Godhead. Oh yes, very God, but united with true humanity. And that true humanity as the God-man is in the presence of God. Accepted there. Which leads to the joy of verse number 8. This blessed kingdom is marked by praise unto God. There are some earthly kingdoms that to live in that kingdom is subject to much misery. The subjects of such kingdoms will say nothing good about their king. They'll say nothing good about the reign or the conditions of the kingdom. But the kingdom of Christ is a kingdom where all those who are part of that kingdom have nothing bad to say about their king and nothing bad to say about the conditions. And if they do, they're guilty of the most dreadful treason, because the king is nothing but good. And when we, within our hearts, sometimes begin to feel a welling up of resentment against our king, may we put it to death instantly. And may treason die in our hearts and never come to our lips. Our king is good, and therefore the only suitable climate for such a kingdom is praise, adoration, and glory. Our God is good. He is kind and merciful, full of tender mercies for us. And we have not a resentment towards our great king. That's the joy of this kingdom. The mark of those subjects also here, sixthly, verse number 5. The heritage given to the king are those people who fear the name of God. This kingdom is marked by those who are God-fearers, who don't fear man, but fear God. Who also don't care what people think about them, but they care what God thinks of them. God is first in their lives. They are part of Christ's kingdom. You see, the fear of God describes those who have turned from their sins and their self-righteousness and have given their lives depending upon God and God alone. It's a beautiful few verses regarding the pictures of Christ's kingdom. So much more we could develop and elaborate. I'd simply ask you the question, are you a subject of this kingdom? No better ruler, no better realm, a kingdom that will endure when this earth is rolled up like a scroll. Christ's kingdom will endure forever and forever. So David is such a vivid gift from God to show us what it is to live a life of faith through imperfections. And yet his kingdom points us forward not to trust in David's kingdom, but to trust in the kingdom of David's greater son. His name is Jesus, Jesus of Nazareth. He gave his life that he might rule and reign forever and forever.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Let the Bible Speak from Malvern Free Presbyterian Church. If you'd like more information about the gospel or the church, please email malvernfpc@yahoo.com. We extend an invitation to all to join us as we worship the Lord each week. You will be made very welcome. We meet for worship on the Lord's Day at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. We preach Christ crucified.